Chair of RUSI, the Royal United Services Institute, and former Deputy Prime Minister. Good afternoon to you.
Afternoon, Sheila.
I couldn't help but reflect at what we're seeing here, the commemorations of victory in Europe, VE Day, and, on the other side of the world, one of a number of awful conflicts ongoing. What's your initial thought when you see that Benjamin Netanyahu is instructing reservists to come back, to take up their positions and to increase the activity already in Gaza, because we know how costly it is all round?
I mean, my initial reaction was, my heart sank at the thought that this would be a further intensification of the military action that we've seen. Clearly, what we have at the moment are reports. We've not seen anything published or stated on the record by the Israeli government. So we need to see that detail before we really make a judgment about this. But my reading of this is that the Israeli government has concluded that what they have been doing so far, their strategy so far, has not worked in terms of defeating Hamas. I mean, there are parts of northern Gaza where sort of the Israeli troops have been in 3 or 4 times and then withdrawn, thinking they defeated Hamas there, and then Hamas cells have popped up again, and there's been firing on IDF forces by Hamas people. So they clearly have decided that the occupation of the whole of the Gaza Strip for an indefinite period of time is what they need to do to preserve their own security. I mean, what I do find depressing is we still hear nothing from the Israeli government about what they think the political outcome is. To look at your analogy with Germany after 1945, I mean, the Western allies committed themselves to a program of reconstruction and reconciliation in Germany within, I think it was 3 years of the end of the war. That the Democratic Federal Republic of Germany had been established within a very few years after the war. Democratic Germany was admitted as a member of NATO. You had leaders like Adenauer, like Erhard, who committed themselves not just to the economic regeneration of Germany, but to building a democracy in Germany. And it's a tribute, actually, to the German people that they have done this, despite all the difficulties they, like every other democracy in the world, faces. Their achievement in the context of Germany's 20th century history is quite remarkable.
It is.
I don't yet see that in Israel-Palestine. I don't see that vision from the Israeli government. And let's be honest about it, I don't see
the desire from Hamas either.
I don't see where the Palestinian leadership is, that has the vision and also has the authority. There are Palestinian leaders who want an accommodation with Israel, but they don't have the political authority. And Hamas, there is no sign of compromise, of recognizing Israel's right to exist.
There's the added difficulty that, our analogy here, it has its limits, doesn't it? Because the German government of the day, it wasn't Hamas, and although Hamas is the government of Gaza, or arguably was the government of Gaza, there are very signal differences as well. But the power you talk about there being absent of those Palestinian leaders who might want to make some kind of more healthy arrangement for Gaza. Isn't the problem that the totalitarianism of Hamas and the violent political Islamism that underpins Hamas is a massive obstacle? And also Netanyahu's difficulties and his disposition on this is also an obstacle. It's on both sides. You have such huge obstacles to this.
Yes, which is why I think if there is a way through to a peaceful and political outcome, it is not going to come quickly. I mean, we've got experience in Northern Ireland where the number of lives lost was appalling, but it was far, far fewer than we've seen in the Israel-Palestine conflict going back over decades now. It takes a long time to sort of build on political opportunity and try to build trust, because trust is completely absent at the moment. And I suspect that there are far fewer Israelis today, after the experience of October the 7th, who would think that it's reasonable to live alongside an independent Palestinian state that would have been the case with Israeli public opinion before October the 7th. And after the loss of life in Gaza, I fear we're going to see a new generation of boys and young men growing up who just want to destroy Israel. So what I'd like to see is the Arab powers working with the Israeli government to strengthen a reformed Palestinian entity, a Palestinian Authority, having real power for that Palestinian Authority on the West Bank in particular. Then you hope to build up some measure of trust on the basis of order in Gaza, with Arab countries, I think, having to take the lead on this with support from the United States and with an Israeli government that wants to see this work. And while I concede readily the horror of 7th of October, that Hamas terrorist attack on Israeli civilians will have enraged Israeli public opinion, I also know that there are people in Mr. Netanyahu's cabinet who openly want to expel the 2 million Palestinians from Gaza and expel the Palestinians from the West Bank and claim those areas as part of the greater Israel. Some of them even expel Arab Israelis who are full Israeli citizens with voting rights inside Israel. And, while the coalition in Israel depends upon those ultra hardliners to
another obstacle to any movement.
Then that's another obstacle. It's a real obstacle.
You mentioned the Arab world there. To what degree is Qatar a good faith actor in this? And I asked that question knowing that in any situation as complicated as this, there are things you will say privately and things you must say publicly. I get that there are two conversations going on at once, at the very least, all the time. But Qatar's role in this?
Oh, I think Qatar is both host to Western military bases and good relations with the West, but it's at the same time got links to various political Islamist movements around the world. And I think, successive...
Well, more than links. I mean, it shields them, doesn't it? It shields Hamas members.
But successive US presidents and successive British governments have been content to use Qatar as an intermediary, because you have to have a channel somewhere.
Of course.
Going back to my Northern Ireland sort of analogy, there were channels that existed long before formal talks and negotiations ever took place. And I think that is true in most conflicts. Those who are fighting one another usually have some third country or some international entity that can pass messages from one to the other if necessary. And if Qatar or other Arab countries could fulfill that role in this conflict, then I think it's better to have that channel available than to try to do without it. Because at some point there has to be a means for the two sides to communicate, even if indirectly, with one another.
And you and I can't have this conversation without talking about the aid blockade into Gaza and the suffering that is causing. People always talk about it being Israel's blockade into Gaza, and it is. But there's another side to that as well, isn't there? That we know Hamas has been commandeering a lot of that aid, and Israel is saying, well, we're not going to help Hamas to feed itself, so sorry. Again, Catch-22 doesn't even cover it, does it? I mean, for some people, it's way more than that. It's a war crime.
But but both the points you made, Sheila, I think are true. But I think that what cannot be defended is a situation where food aid is not allowed in, where vital medical supplies are not allowed in, where the materials necessary to keep clean, potable water available are not being allowed in. I mean, the one silver lining I felt about the reports coming out of Israel this morning was the report that the Israeli government accepted that, along with occupation of the Gaza Strip,
comes responsibility.
They had to accept responsibility for the distribution of aid. But then it struck me, 2 million people living there, many of them in nothing more than tents, many of them with sort of severe PTSD after the sort of experiences that they've been through.
No doubt.
How are the Israelis going to actually manage this logistically on the ground? If we put the politics one side, just think about the practicalities of this. And I I really hope that the aid is allowed. I know it's essential it is. Um, and I'm pleased the Israelis will accept responsibility for that if the areas they occupy. But the practicalities of that are going to be extraordinarily challenging.
Can I ask you about organisations like the International Committee of the Red Cross and the World Health Organization? The ICRC commenting this morning on that aid blockade and the World Health Organization over the weekend as well. What role can they play realistically here, given the volatility of the situation, the men with guns, basically, and the mess that Gaza is in physically?
All they can do is while there is a war going on, is to go in on the basis of assurances of safe conduct to deliver aid, and they should continue, as they have been doing, to submit to various checks on the Israeli side of the border crossings to make sure that ICRC or other charitable vehicles are not being used to smuggle in arms or munitions that Hamas would then use. But there's a limit to what they can do while there is bombing and shelling and shooting still going on. And so what the sort of ordinary families in Gaza desperately need is stability. A truce is
And the
is,
hostages. We can't forget the hostages in all of this,
and the
can we, at the
hostage
same time?
and the hostages
Yeah.
be released. I mean, it is we shouldn't let Hamas off the hook. It was wrong, utterly wrong and inhumane for them to mount the attacks on 7th of October and to seize hostages in the first place. In my views, they should be released unconditionally. And then let us have the talks. And I think if Hamas want an end to the talks, want to demonstrate goodwill, letting those hostages free and returning the remains of those who have died in captivity is the best and quickest route for them to take.
Can I ask you, there have been a lot of voices saying, inside and outside Israel, saying Hamas cannot be wiped out. They cannot be defeated militarily in the way that, say, the Nazis were defeated militarily, and definitively, and Japan as well. That unconditional surrender. We've heard those extraordinary quotes, haven't we, from Churchill at the time and from others this morning. Is this situation materially different? We defeated Stalinism, we defeated the cult of the emperor in Japan, we defeated Nazism. Is Israel wrong to want to definitively defeat Hamas?
I think Israel is quite right to want to see an end to Hamas's attack, its commitment to an ongoing struggle, a jihad, if you like, against the Israeli state and its refusal to accept the legitimacy of the Israeli state that's been a member of the United Nations since 1948. Accepted by most Arab countries now as a legitimate nation in the region. But I think it's foolish, given what's happened, to think that people who've grown up, children who've been growing up,
are not going to be affected by this.
Your family is being killed, and you're afraid of being killed by Israeli bombs or Israeli bullets. These people are out to destroy us. Changing minds and hearts is going to be extraordinarily difficult. And what we did in Germany, after we and the other Western allies, was to think about the institutional framework within which Germany could be rebuilt. And if you look back at what Churchill was writing and saying, very quickly after the end of the war, he was already talking about the need to find a way to let Germany take its place again amongst the nations.
But how do you denazify?
You have to.
You denazify Germany. How do you? Well, not fully, obviously, but how do you denazify, or whatever the equivalent word is, in this situation?
Certainly, Israel has the right to defend itself, but also it seems to me that it is in Israel's interest, the interest of Israeli security, to offer a vision or contribute with its Arab neighbors to a vision for the Palestinian people, whereby they can look to have a state of their own, to live themselves in peace, security, and building prosperity.
That's also the responsibility of the Palestinian people as
without
well, isn't
committing
it?
themselves.
But that's also
Yes,
the
that
responsibility
has
of
to involve the
Palestinian people as well.
Palestinian
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think
the
the
ones in
West
Gaza
Bank,
have barely got time to breathe at the moment.
its starting point is the West Bank. But I think we would be kidding ourselves if we thought after what has happened in the last 3 years in Gaza that there is a quick route to reconciliation and a deep, long, permanent peace there. I think it's going to be truce, gradual measures, but you can do a lot more quickly in the West Bank if there's a genuine commitment by the Israeli government, but actively supported by Arab countries who want to see a stable Middle East and who want to live in amity with Israel as a neighbour.
Thank you very much indeed. Always good to talk to you, Sir David Livington, Chair of RUSI, the Royal United Services Institute, former Deputy Prime Minister. Your call